Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up in podcast form at ArtistFirst.com. Want to send some questions or comments, you can always hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
The seas were angry that day, my friend. Yes, here we are.
Here we are.
We're not happy about it.
Oh, my.
Of course we're happy about it. We're always happy about it. We're always happy to see you people. We can see you. We can see every one of you. I have a magic mirror here. I can see Johnny and Timmy. And now I'm really dating myself because you people have no idea what a magic mirror is, but we do have one here. Don't we?
Oh, my.
It didn't have any glass in it. That always used to annoy me.
What was your name? Now I've forgotten.
It's Crazy Town? I have no idea. It's Clavel? I have no idea. Anyway, we're talking about Romper Room, and never mind.
And Mr. Doobie?
It was a show from a long time ago.
Yes, we are very much dating ourselves.
Anyway, back on track. And tonight's show is, in some ways, sort of dating all of us in one way or another, because every one of us, I think, has struggled with the emotion of anger.
Mm-hmm.
And why we struggle with it is probably because we're very often told that we can't express it. Especially when you're a child, you get told, don't be angry, don't do X, Y, or Z, don't yell, don't act out, behave yourself, and some of it, of course, is necessary. You have to. The beast inside must be civilized. You can't have everybody in the world running around like a 2-year-old, because then it would just be awesome. But oftentimes anger is met with anger. In fact, anger as an emotion. When people study the emotions, anger evokes anger. If you want someone to be angry at you, you just have to yell or be angry at them, and bam, they're off. And there's actually two basic reactions to anger. One is fear, and the other is anger. To the extent, it's very much tied to the extent of the threat. If the threat that you perceive is one that you feel you can fight, you become angry. It evokes an anger response, and there's a whole host of physiological changes that happen when you become angry. And even seeing a picture or watching someone be angry on TV or in a movie will evoke those same sort of feelings, either anger or conversely fear. So anger wells up in us. We get annoyed at something, and then there's two things that happen, especially in adults. Is you kind of stifle that anger. You don't. You've either been taught over the course of your life, or you've taught yourself to repress that anger, or if you've had a sort of a better experience with your emotions, learn to identify and channel the anger, make it into something that can be useful. But oftentimes you find people whose anger is habitually repressed, and that oftentimes leads to a lot of either self-destructive behavior or sometimes physiological problems. The repression of any emotion can have physiological effects because you've got all kinds of tremendous
cortisol responses.
Cortisol and stress hormones coursing into your body when you become angry, and they cause things to happen. They cause your blood pressure to skyrocket, your face flushes, your muscles tense, your heart starts pumping, because you're getting ready to either attack or defend or get out of or get out of Dodge. Exactly. So, as a society, again, civilizing the beast within, anger is frowned upon. It is. There are very few ways in which you can openly express anger or aggression without some sort of repercussion. Even just a basic one, which somebody gets angry back at you and you have a fight. But oftentimes you're told to control yourself. So it can become a sort of a negative feedback loop where anger leads to suppressed anger, which leads to kind of bitterness and more anger.
Well, it's interesting when people try to suppress anger because they literally think that they have to sit on it, which is kind of interesting as an energetic analogy, that you're supposed to stopper it up so that it doesn't express itself. And truth is, it's an energy booster that comes in. And internally, you are to focus that energy in more appropriate channels. But unless you're really shown how to do that, it's a very bumpy uphill battle trying to get a hold of your anger, as the phrase is.
That's the phrase, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because the tendency is to take all that energy and say, okay, holding the anger means I'm restraining it, instead of allowing that it's highly focused energy and usually at a target. When you observe anger, it erupts. And people, if you don't have an internal system, it's an explosion. You just everywhere, hitting anything and everything and completely random. Whereas
I would just stop you there and just say that the fine point on it, I think, is your first point is it's focused. And focus is not really an explosion, because I think true anger is focused, and it's the anger that you repress and dam up and wall up until it becomes irrepressible. That becomes the explosion anger.
That's rage.
Well, it's the difference between letting off, the idea of having some emotional back pressure and letting it out of course, it's anger, so it's a little bit destructive, if you will, but it's out. I think you remember your nanny. She would let everything out, and she never held anything. But if you hold it, then you get the indiscriminate, everybody's my enemy anger.
No, it's understanding. I'm talking about in the moment when it rises up, how to handle it. Okay, it's not just sitting on it, because when you sit on it, you keep putting it somewhere. You put it to the side. You put it in a sack somewhere that you drag around. I'm talking about right in the moment when it rises up, understanding that this is a packet of energy that needs to be focused, transmuted. Because the anger is if you take it apart bit by bit, it's understanding that the mind, the ego especially, has judged something and saying that this is either good or bad. And so if it's done a judgment call and the response is the anger, it doesn't necessarily have, how do I say this, the internal structure to take all that anger and focus it on what it needs to be focused on. It's discerning the moment, discerning what's causing all of this. And when you're trained to disarm an explosive situation, you take everything that's going on into account. Not just your particular viewpoint. Maybe that's the best way to put it. All right? And yeah, you can be angry, but you also know, well, I've got to disarm this before someone actually gets hurt.
And the difference between those two is the training.
Mm-hmm. And to be able to take a step out of your own, I feel this, and that's wrong, and something should be done about it, and maybe I should do something about it. It's like, okay, wait a minute, what's actually happening?
And again, the difference between those two is I-focused, egocentric anger, and lashing out.
Because you can't contain it.
Because you can't contain it.
When it's self-referent, you can't contain it. You're basically focusing in on yourself and how you feel, which basically amplifies. It goes into this tight little ball, amplifies until you can't contain it anymore.
Right.
But if the focus is, okay, I'm in this moment right now, what is actually going on, and how can this be disarmed? Completely different. That's when the energy almost webs out in a structure. How do I describe?
I think I understand. I think you're. What we're basically saying is, let's say you take the person. You're born with emotions. We all have them. You, over time, get sort of a reaction to your emotions, and some sort of, let's say, haphazard training. Mostly is don't be angry, don't be sad, whatever. And these don't give you anything, because it's basically turning it right back to you, without any kind of guidance on what to do. The idea of understanding that we all have emotions, we're all angry, that the situation is always outside of me, that I am not defined by the emotion, therefore the situation is the emotion, and then everyone around me who's being affected by it, and what can I do, as you said, to diffuse it. It's either trained or insightfully learned. Some people also have more natural ability to do that versus others, but you take your emotion and separate out the you from it. When you do it the other way, when it's you identify with the emotion, I'm angry, and I now get to go boof, and just.
Yes, I was about to say that the difference is understanding the line between I feel angry and I am angry.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's precisely it.
When you realize that you're feeling angry, the emotion doesn't take your identity. It doesn't take possession of you. As opposed to saying, I am angry, which means that suddenly you've become the personification of anger.
Exactly.
And that is something that, if no one has shown you how to do that, it takes a number of experiences for you to realize that, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be angry. How many times have we heard people say that?
I love when language illuminates state of being is to identify your existence with the thing. So if I don't want, I am angry means you be angry. And what you just said is I don't want to be angry. I don't want to personify or assume the identity of anger.
And most people understand that statement. I don't want to be angry, because it's not a happy feeling. It's not comfortable. It's something that is intrinsically to our human nature. Not something where we want to reside. You don't want to live in anger.
And it's sort of an uncontrolled state. You do things in anger, and there's always this wonderful saying, something said in anger, a moment said in anger lives forever, It's that you do things in anger that you would never do. You hurt yourself and others in anger when you become anger.
And that's an interesting statement, actually, because what then is it in that moment of expressing anger that allows it to reverberate through time, through life, or people's memories? What is it about that reverberates and does such damage?
I'd say that anger is such a strong emotion, and it's so quickly, it's like fire. It catches from one to the other. It leaps across. And it becomes existential because anger feels like somebody's threatening your life. When you put people in a situation where they feel threatened, especially threatened at a basic existential level, it turns into an experience which they internalize. If you're constantly exposed to situations where your life is in threat, you get these kind of PTSD type disorders because in essence you internalize all that stress. Anger, especially anger that you're exposed to on a regular basis, can scar you in essence.
Well, my point being is that anger is in that moment, and suddenly your awareness becomes so sensitized, it's so real to you, so alive that it's suddenly recorded on your soul.
Absolutely. It's a moment of intense clarity where you're being told that you're if someone is angry at you, their words have an edge. They're like a knife, like a bullet. They do damage. They actually cut and wound, and those wounds aren't obviously physical wounds. They could also be accompanied by physical pain, but they aren't physical wounds, but they're wounds nonetheless. And something that is said in pure anger cuts through all the defenses. It goes right to the core.
But that's my point. Why does it do it that way? How is it possible that we receive that blow? Because you have to allow that in.
Yes, you do. Because anger also triggers anger, you get the person's physiological response before they're even aware of it. They're angry before if someone comes at you in anger, you're angry before you know you are, and they may have been angry before they knew they were. You're already in an existential fight reaction. It gets below the defenses, if you will.
That's sort of allowing for, well, it's all sort of subconscious. And there's an aspect of you that is conscious of the fact that you're choosing in a half second whether or not you're going to participate in anger or not.
Absolutely.
But that's what I mean. It's not just, okay, we just, I did this and he did that. And no, there's more to you than that. And it's understanding that there is that.
Right, but you said it. It's a half second, and unless you're trained to act with volition in that very stressful situation, you will go off. Anger, as you said before, it overwhelms the judgment. It becomes the reaction to anger becomes more than you can control. It blasts past your volition.
I think it's because those statements or what's spoken in anger is actually attacking your identity. I think that's why the anger is so it marks you. It marks you in that moment because it's going back to I feel anger or I am anger.
Yes.
And when you become anger, that's why it hits you so hard that you carry it through your lifetime, that memory. You have identified yourself with that emotion, and it marked you in your identity.
Yes, exactly. Maybe that's what I meant by existential. It's your identity. It's your existence. So you're being made. The wonderful phrase is, "Don't make me angry." Don't make me angry. You're being made to identify with anger. If you
If you give that ability over to someone, that they will make you angry.
Exactly. And that's a great point, because the trigger for all this has to be enabled. You do have to give someone the ability to make you angry, because you do have that half second or whatever it is to choose. It may feel like so short a time that you don't have a choice, but you do. You do have a choice to participate or not. And once you allow someone to take control of you by making you angry, truly putting their energy on you and changing you, wounding you, damaging you, making you something you're not, and therefore, like you say, it changes your existence. It wounds you at that level of who are you.
Well, it basically puts you in a spot where suddenly you are angry.
Yeah.
But it's not just the feeling of anger, but you have become anger, and you don't like it. Okay? But you don't realize the fact that there is a difference between just feeling the anger and being the anger. No one's pointed that out. So it takes time to make that transition.
Right.
To understand that I am not anger. I am something so much more. But this is what was in a family, let's say. This is what they did. This is the examples that they gave. And it takes a very, you have to become so very aware of who you actually are that you do not accept that anger and just say, well, I feel anger, but I am not anger.
And that's the door out.
Yes.
But it's a difficult door if you've never, as you said earlier, if you've never been given any other examples. It's one of the reasons why the early training in anger, or rather the early training when you express anger, becomes harder and harder to undo the further along you go, or the more you're kind of given this example of how to deal with anger. If the example is always given is, if every time you got angry, people screamed and yelled at you not to be angry, by in essence becoming even more angry because you got angry. That's the response you learn, and that's the response you pattern. Now, there's a part of you, as you said, that says, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be angry. It's a frightening, uncomfortable, out of control kind of emotion. Especially if you be it, if that's who you are angry, and you have to live there. So the rejection of the being of anger is it's the door out. It's you have to start to break that hook that was put in you, that kind of, you are this. No, I'm not. I'm not angry. I am me, and there is anger.
Well, that is the beginning of identifying yourself with the events. There's a difference between what you feel and what has happened to you. And if you have gone through a state of anger, you felt the anger, and you went through it, but you are not the anger. And that's a hard one, because most people identify themselves to what happened to them, especially if it happened in anger.
Yes. It's a very, anger has barbs. It has hooks. It will get into you and hook into you and evoke the response, and at the same time dig in further, so that you're hurt, and you can be hurt again in the same way, and you'll get the same reaction back out. And removing these hooks of anger is similar in many ways to removing any kind of hook. You've got to experience some pain in removal, in breaking of that attachment, of that identification. Your body betrays you with anger, and with lots of different emotions, but anger is one of the worst, because your body will go along with the attack as a physiological response. It wants to react to survive because it feels threatened. Who you are is not your body. Who you are is not your ego. But your ego and your body are in collusion. They're like, I am being attacked. I am angry, and I will attack back, or I will defend or run. So it's those hooks are really deep. They're down in the deep in your heartbeat and in your blood pressure and in your physiological cortisol, and they're in your ego, which is ego hooks are some of the worst hooks because they're right down with who you think you are, not who you are, but who you think you are, which is a very big difference that is hard for people to untangle. Who you think you are is all about the I, and your body is all about the thing that's carrying you around. But the ego and the body get right together and say, "Yep, this is who I think I am, and this is my body."
Right.
Yep.
Well, energetically speaking, it's interesting because anger is many times looked on as such a strong negative energy that it becomes this demon-like thing. And if you think of it in terms of taking over someone, someone's soul can be possessed by anger.
Yes.
And when you have to break that bond, because sometimes anger becomes an addiction.
So true.
Okay, you have to break that addiction to being angry. And that means it's called soul retrieval.
Yes.
Okay, you have to retrieve the part of your soul that is being consumed by anger and wanting to stay there.
Well, and I want to just reemphasize the addiction part of it is exactly, you get a high from anger.
Yes, you do.
You feel powerful when
Yes.
you're angry, and that's the seductiveness of anger, especially if it's been modeled to you that the powerfulest one is the angriest one.
Right.
So I can't be powerful unless I'm angry.
Or I can always be more powerful than somebody else the minute I drop into anger.
Power over, power under, even more seductive.
And that is something that you have to be very aware of, because it's always, you wind up being in a relationship where someone either has something on you or you have something on someone else, and it's a manipulator, power manipulator. So anger is always in the midst of all that.
Talk about a demon. Well, and the demons of commercialism are calling us away. So we're going to go back to the studio. You guys deal with your demons, and we'll be back.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Minette Lauren, author of Race for the Sun. Do you believe in guardian angels? Check out book 1 of my Soul Watcher series. It can be found on Amazon.com or anywhere fine books are sold. Go to www.minettelauren.com, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Please remain calm. You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Let's get back to the wise ones. It's Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Angry ones. Yes, I hope you were able to, as Scott said, remain calm during the break. But we, on the other hand, tonight we're talking about anger, and the first half hour we kind of explored, some of the reasons why people, in essence, internalize anger, and they let both themselves be defined by the emotion of anger, and then they actually become it. They be anger. They say, I am, the verb of being, am angry, or I don't want to be angry. And the point we were kind of coming to at the end of the last half hour was that the idea of separating yourself and saying there is an I who has emotions. I am a human being and I have emotions. I have a body, I have a soul, I have a spirit, and the body has physiological responses that are very important for survival that are called emotions. Those emotions are states of physical being that have effects on your mental being, on your spirit being. The problem with the body is if you identify too closely with it, it will easily and happily take you over and push you around. So the emotion is the body's power. It comes from the hara, it comes from the third chakra, the emotion. Especially emotions like anger, which are about power over, power under, fight and flight, existential type responses. And when they rise up unbidden, and they can physiologically kind of overwhelm you, especially if you're not prepared, or if you're kind of taken unawares, because that's what they're for. They're supposed to be reactive and they're supposed to be fast because they're all about surviving an attack.
Well, I don't know about unbidden, because it's a response. It's usually a trigger for an emotion to rise up from your body, especially from your base chakra, which is your survival chakra, and then all the way up to the power. Now, power is where the body is able to move. And as you said, it's just pure reflex. Pure reflex is much faster than thinking about it and moving it.
And you mentioned, this was during the break, but we mentioned that when there are positive responses, positive ways to channel anger. When somebody is a martial artist or somebody is a fighter of any type, the emotion of anger is used to power that third chakra, but the circumference of the training is what keeps it in control. So you don't become this berserker or angry at your opponent. In fact, if your opponent becomes angry, you have a much easier time dealing with them because they're no longer acting; they're reacting. And once your opponent is reacting, you have control over them because you're making them react.
Well, you can manipulate them then.
Yeah.
If they are responding in anger.
Yes.
There's a whole switch of mindset, and they take a whole different approach to trying to take you out. Like someone may have, they get so angry at you that they basically put the gun down and go for your throat with their hands because they want to throttle you.
Right. Exactly. You lose. We mentioned again during the break that when you fight in anger, you no longer fight with any sort of tactic or any kind of strategy. You just fight. And if you're powerful, because anger can make you powerful, you can win the day, but you may do just as much damage to your friends as your enemies, or to yourself as the other. Anger takes no prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was that berserker mode that
exactly
a lot of the Vikings, they were very proud of going into berserker mode, because they just basically destroyed everything in sight. And it didn't really matter who was there, your friend or foe.
Right, exactly. Anger is sometimes compared to fire, because anger has no, it doesn't respect friend or foe. It just destroys. It's a destructive force if not controlled, as is fire. But then, just as fire can provide warmth and can cook your food, anger, properly channeled, understood about what it is and what it isn't. It's not me, and it's not existential. It is a powerful emotional and mental response that you can use, as you mentioned in the very first part of our half hour. It can become this energy source, both a spiritual energy source and a motivational force, and really just an amazing power source, an energy source that you can use.
Yes. And it is something that at that point, when you can take it and transform it, it will sustain the movement, whatever it is, the purpose. Because usually when you're angry, but it's that refined anger, cold, I call it cold anger, because you're taking it and you can focus it into a laser-like sense of purpose and effort. And speaking for myself, I know that is one of the things that helped me get through Chris's illness. I was very angry at the disease, but you couldn't go scattershot. So I took that rose in me, because you want to be able to destroy it, but focused it in the appropriate channels.
Yes.
And that was years. Okay, that's years of effort.
Yes, and a crucible of training. that no one this is something which you don't want to be in that arena, but if you go through it, you know you've been tried, you've been tested. You mentioned me. It just occurred to me that you mentioned me before that there's. Remember, we were talking in the last half hour. You guys were all paying attention, right? We were talking about how in a situation there are folks who will be able to come into the anger situation and diffuse it. And actually, what they're really doing is controlling the anger of others by in essence understanding their anger that they can't control and using it to taking their power, because if you're not controlling your anger, people are able to take that power if they know what to do, and in essence, use your anger against you, or use the power of the anger and diffuse it and put it back into a situation that isn't out of control. And I remember you told me that part of one of your meditations, I'm probably paraphrasing this, was breathing in essence, anger, and then breathing out the pure light, destroying the anger by taking it in, transforming it, and putting it back out again.
That is a Tibetan exercise. And you can do that with any kind of negativity. It's not just anger.
Right.
And to do that in a cancer room is what they recommend if someone is very sick and in pain. You literally can image the energy and breathe in that negativity, that pain, and allow God's presence to transform it in your heart, and you're breathing out pure light. And it literally is an exercise where you're breathing in almost like if you can imagine the room filled with a smog, negative and icky and sticky, and you're the vehicle by which it enters in, is burned up and purified, and pure light is being exhaled into the room. And you continue sitting in that spot and doing that until the entire room is just pure light. There is a Tibetan technique in order to do that.
And I think if even if it's not using that specific technique, those who have learned to deal with their own anger and channel it and transform it can then apply that to the anger of others. Again, in a martial arts situation, if your opponent has lost control, you, the trained person who understands that, can turn their anger against them. You can use their own power, like shujitsu or something, against them. Even though they're trying to hurt you, their power is no longer focused and directed.
That's the example, which is always in the Chinese martial arts movies, and everything is dubbed, but you always see these fighters insulting each other. Trying to get the other person annoyed, or they make these grand statements of how good a fighter they are, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole idea is to trigger the other person.
Right.
That's why it's so campy.
Right. But the basic tenet that they're trying to show you is that the winner is the one who has the most control and the most training. Yes, they're just as angry, they're just as emotional, but they don't allow it to. They don't become it. They aren't being the anger. They're still themselves at the center.
Well,
and
you understand you are not your emotion.
Exactly.
In that training, and you are supposed to command your body. Your body doesn't command you.
Exactly.
And that's all part of that internal training.
And then if you go to, I think, let's call it the next level, you're able to see that others have lost it. I'm reminded of that, and this is something that's a little non sequitur, but I'm reminded of that wonderful poem of Rudyard Kipling called If. And it's a long poem, and it's a beautiful poem. But in essence, what it's trying to say is that one of the lines is when all around you are basically losing it. They've gone into reaction mode. They are all in anger, and they're blaming you They're trying to put all their anger and frustration on you, and you take it all and say, I am not that. I am still calm. I am at the center. That idea of center can go outside of you and outside of your emotion and go out and fill the room and cleanse it of that negative fog of anger. When these people say, when this person, this woman, this man came in, everyone was losing it, and they took control of the situation, because all that negative emotion, the fear and the anger, responds to control. Part of that, why people are doing it, is because they don't know what to do.
Right.
And go ahead.
They are given direction, and that's what they need.
Exactly.
But it takes a person who is in that, I am feeling anger, but I am not anger,
right,
to be able to perceive exactly what's going on and say, here, here, here.
Right. It's that avenging angel energy. You are at the highest level of power and the highest level of anger at a situation, but you're not out of control. You're using a sword as a tool and a weapon, not as a bludgeon or like a berserker, where you're wailing in every direction. It becomes the precision of anger. Anger can be incredibly precise, like you said, like a laser, if you know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. You refine it into a tool. Yeah, if you understand that anger is actually a tool, then it changes a whole bunch of things. Just, especially if you're in any kind of confrontation or conflict, or like sports and stuff with team
sports. Yeah.
Your physical body reacts to whatever is going on, and it takes training to have the appropriate responses, to understand whatever the strategy happens to be, and are you there at the right place at the right time. It's all part of understanding how a person is part of a group, a team.
Yeah.
Because there's always one figure that is in charge, and they have to learn how to be extensions of that one person.
To be a unit, to be unified. But even turn it the other way around, that unifying principle, that control principle, can engender others to emulate that. The idea of one trained person can turn chaos into order. One trained person can turn anger that's out of control and berserker into, let's get something done. Yes, disaster has struck. We are angry about it, but we're not going to fly in all directions and waste, because it's power. As you mentioned earlier, the first thing we said is it's energy, it's power. And like any kind of energy, unchanneled, it can destroy. Channeled, it can create. It can defend. It can attack if necessary. But it isn't attacking randomly. It's going and doing what your will has said needs to be done. The power is there. It requires the will.
Yes, but it requires a consciousness that is able to observe and not identify oneself with the reactions that are going on.
Right.
What is actually going on? Are we being manipulated in some way, shape, or form? Are you giving in to that? Are you indulging in that response? Because sometimes those are indulgences.
As you mentioned at the end of the last half hour, it becomes addictive. Our quote this evening we put up is one from a wonderful man who's since passed on, Leo Buscaglia, one of your favorite philosophers, and we loved the books that he wrote and seeing his tapes and videos and shows back in the day. And one thing that anger can do, especially if you habitually become addicted to anger, is you're going to push people away, and you're going to cut off what is essential for all of us, which is love. Anger, an angry heart is not a heart that allows love. It pushes love out. If you be anger, you are not allowing love. And if you let people make you angry and control you that way, you have no life within you. Your life is enslaved to those who can make you angry, or who own your bitterness. And what is the consequence of habitual anger? And habitual addiction to anger is bitterness.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Or putting anger into a place where you're not dealing with it produces bitterness, and is not a comfortable feeling, because you wind up doing things out of anger and you don't even realize it.
Exactly.
You just respond and you don't even know why. And it's because something had come up that said, this is something that I'm still angry about.
Exactly. I mean, that's what bitterness is. It's anger that you're holding on to fiercely,
Mm-hmm.
And that you've not only have you identified with it, but you're now living in it. You're lying in it. You're breathing in it. You're kind of wallowing in this pit of anger.
And it's interesting because children are always watching how you handle things like that. If something happens, what is your reaction? This huge stressor comes in. What are you doing? And they'll just take it in.
Yeah.
It brings back a memory of Christopher, where we always did timeout if you did something naughty. And I remember he had done a couple of things naughty, and it was, okay, now you get sent to your room. And being sent to your room meant you had to just lie in your bed, and you were not allowed to play with any toys. And you have to think about what it is that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you do that? And do you understand its repercussions? So I remember coming up after giving him some time alone, because I wanted to talk to him about this. You shouldn't be doing this. I remember him lying there on the bed, and he had his hands behind his head, just completely relaxed. And he just looked at me with this very calculated look. And we're talking, this is a small child, people. Maybe 5, if that. And I started asking him about it, and, why, have you thought about it? Why this is not right? And he looked at me and said, with a chin up, why should I listen to you? Now, as a parent, your first response, of course, is, what?
Right.
And then it's an anger response. And I looked at him. I really looked at him. And what I read was, you think you're so smart. I'm in this bed because you're bigger than me. But I know how to handle you. And he knew a statement like that would trigger anger. And I remember standing there going, oh, Lord, this child is very bright. But he needs to understand the repercussions of his actions. Please, give me the words to show him that what he says and what he does matters, not just to himself, but to other people.
Mm.
I remember him just looking at me, waiting for my head to explode. Because, he knew that was an absolute diss.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to him, Chris, would you like to hear a story? looked at me like, wait a minute. This is not the reaction I'm supposed to get. Looked at me almost like, am I tricking him in some way? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And he sort of sat up in bed at that point, wondering, like, fight or flight, am I going to, like, get creamed? And that's when God had poured into my head the story of the Mischief Man.
It's in the book.
And that's in the book. And in a nutshell, the Mischief Man is, what I had said to him is, when you grow up, everybody has a Mischief Man. They have you, and you have your Mischief Man. And your Mischief Man just goes around and tells you, you want to do that because that'll be fun. Or, let's try this. It's something. And as you grow up, you're supposed to bring the Mischief Man into a whole new state. And that new state is called the Fun Man. You have to have Mischief Man mature into Fun Man. And he was entranced by the idea of having a fun man. What is a fun man?
Yeah.
And a fun man is someone who knows how to enjoy life without anyone else getting hurt. Everybody loves a fun man because they know when they're with him, they'll have fun and they will never get hurt. And they know it. And that's what you're supposed to become.
Right. And on all of us, I mean, that lesson was right straight from God, and it's in the book that there's a Reaper, and Christopher internalized that, and he needed it, and everyone who's ever read that part of the book loves that. We've had people come up to us and say, "The Fun Man," and we're like, "Yeah." That's all they said. The Fun Man.
But it's something that he understood.
You know what the Fun Man is telling me?
What?
The fun is over.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, I'm angry. Anyway, the fun is over for tonight, folks. But go out and get the book, and you can read all about this. And The Soul of the Everyman, I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.